Mid-sip of my morning coffee, my garden hose sputtered like a punctured tire, then went bone dry. Strange, considering I own the rights to the spring-fed stream that waters this entire valley. It was a scorching July, hitting 100 degrees Fahrenheit for days, and my little slice of Eden chickens, heirloom tomatoes, and all relied on that stream winding past my cabin. My land sat just beyond the manicured grip of Maple Glen Estates, an HOA so pretentious its name sounded like a scented candle. For 7 years, I'd lived quietly on this plot my grandpa Arthur left me, dodging the nosy retirees and lawn-obsessed neighbors next door. That peace shattered when Eleanor Vance, a former realtor turned HOA tyrant, moved in 4 houses down the ridge. Eleanor's face was a permanent sneer, like she was perpetually sniffing sour milk, and her attitude was sharper than attack. She'd been obsessed with my property from day one, snapping photos over the fence, reporting fake code violations, even climbing a ladder once to snoop on my compost heap. But cutting my water line during a severe drought? That was a declaration of war. I traced the hose up the hill, heart pounding. The ground was soft, freshly trenched. My irrigation tapped into a pipe linked to a filtered creek inlet, buried and untouchable, or so I thought. The pipe was sliced clean, zip-tied with a neon green tag. Violation removed PR order. Order from who? I stormed toward the HOA border, passing the ancient maple marking my land. There stood Eleanor, arms crossed, sunglasses perched low, sweating through her mint green cardigan like she was posing for a How to Wreck Lives brochure. "What the hell are you doing?" I barked. She didn't blink. "You've been overwatering during restrictions. As HOA president, I'm enforcing compliance." I reminded her, teeth clenched, that my land wasn't under her thumb. She smirked. "Water doesn't care about property lines, Ethan. You're setting a bad example for the community." She strutted off like she'd just won a debate, leaving me with a severed pipe and a rage boiling hotter than the sun. Then it hit me like a thunderclap. Eleanor had no clue. She'd cut the line fed by my spring, the same spring whose stream meandered through my yard, past my chicken coop, under my footbridge, and only then trickled down into Maple Glen Estates, feeding their fake turf, prize rose beds, and putting green dreams. They had no well, no backup water source, just sprinklers sipping my water. I crouched by the broken pipe, a grin slowly spreading across my face. For once, I held the ace. If Eleanor Vance wanted a water war, I was about to become a 5-star general. By dusk, I'd patched the pipe with PVC and duct tape, a temporary fix, enough to keep my garden alive. But the real fight was just beginning. I dug out Grandpa Arthur's property records from a waterproof pouch in my desk. Crisp deeds, proving 2 crucial things. My property boundary stretched a full 12 feet past where the HOA thought it did, and, more importantly, I owned the spring head and all associated water rights. Notarized 80 years ago, reaffirmed in 2003 after Dad passed. These weren't flimsy HOA rules. This was ironclad law. I marked my true line with bright red paint on 4 sturdy oak posts and staked vibrant orange flags firmly in the dirt. Trespassers would know exactly when they'd crossed onto my land. Near the severed pipe, I taped a note to a glass jar. Water flows where it's wanted. The next morning, I took a stroll downstream. Maple Glen Estates was already wilting. Lawns were fading from emerald to dull yellow. Sprinklers clicked uselessly. Dry hoses lay limp like forgotten snakes. Eleanor's cronies huddled in her driveway, fanning themselves, occasionally pointing uphill towards my property. She locked eyes with me across the distance. I gave a polite, neighborly wave. That afternoon, a guy in a khaki uniform, clearly some contractor hired by the HOA, trespassed onto my land, claiming he needed to inspect unauthorized changes to shared infrastructure. Shared? I asked calmly. Show me the work order and proof this is shared infrastructure. He had nothing. Now show me your warrant to be on my private property. He had none of that either. You've got 2 choices, I said, keeping my voice even. Leave now, or I call Sheriff Miller and you can explain trespassing to him. He bolted like a spooked deer. That night, by lantern light, I studied the creek's gentle burble. With a few strategic adjustments, I could reroute its main flow entirely. Legally. On my land. No illegal damming, no environmental crime, Just a subtle nudge to make the water bypass their intake culvert altogether. At dawn, knee-deep in the cool stream, I got to work. The creek split naturally near a rocky bend where I used to skip stones as a kid. I carefully stacked flat stones and wedged a few sturdy logs, making it look like natural erosion control. By noon, the main flow leaned decisively left, curving through my woods, away from Maple Glen. Their precious lawns would be dust by week's end. I watched the HOA's slow collapse like a patient vulture. Their community newsletter, filled with drought do's and don'ts, preached water-saving tips while their decorative koi pond slowly turned to murky sludge. At the local diner, I overheard a resident moaning about her prize-winning tulips shriveling on the stem. Eleanor hadn't confronted me directly since the pipe-cutting incident, but I knew she was scheming. I checked my property markers daily. I installed a trail cam, disguised inside a birdhouse, overlooking the creek fork. I planted a professionally made sign right where the stream now diverged, private spring and stream. No HOA access. Polite, but lethal in Eleanor's world. Days later, I caught a snooper in a polo shirt with a clipboard, pretending to study daisies near my property line. He claimed he was charting flow patterns for a community environmental group. No business card, no agency affiliation. Just a quick exit when I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture of his license plate. They were trying to build a case, but I'd already sent the county clerk my notarized deeds, GPS boundary data, and timestamped drone shots of my property lines and the spring source. All sealed and certified. Panic began to ripple through Maple Glen. Whispers reached town. One HOA board member publicly questioned Eleanor's authority on water matters. Another reportedly quit paying dues altogether. I didn't gloat, but I didn't shed any tears for them either. They, or at least their leader, had cut my water without a word of warning. Consequences sting. Then, new footprints appeared near my rock diversion. Fresh boot prints from a nighttime snoop. Someone had clumsily nudged a stone out of place. I decided to up the ante. I rigged motion-activated sprinklers tied to my barn's rainwater tank, filled with a potent but harmless mix of concentrated garlic oil and skunk spray essence. Safe, but vile. At 2 a.m., they triggered. The trail cam footage was gold. One of Eleanor's known associates, a smug-looking guy usually seen in loafers, soaked and flailing in the muddy creek bank, cursing as he fled into the darkness. I laughed until my sides hurt, saving the clip as evidence for potential trespassing charges. Maple Glen's creek intake was barely a trickle now. Their green-belted community was turning into a desert. Eleanor's attempt to file a vandalism report at the town hall flopped when residents, present for another matter, grilled her about digging rights and property lines. She dodged the questions, her face flushed. I sat on my porch, sipping lemonade, my packet of deeds ready for the county if needed. Sometimes, the real power was silence, just letting their self-inflicted pressure cook. By sunset, I stood in my orchard. The rerouted creek sparkled as it wound through the peach trees. Deer drank peacefully nearby. Birds sang in the branches. Peace wasn't total victory yet, but this corner of it was undeniably mine. The heat wave worsened, and Maple Glen's lawns crumbled to ash. Their newsletter now desperately begged residents to lobby the county for emergency water trucks. Checking my trail cam, I found deeper boot prints near my diversion rocks Eleanor's, alongside those of a man carrying plumbing tools. They were plotting something more direct. 2 days later, I caught the plumber, knee-deep in my creek on my land, trying to force the flow back towards their culvert. My phone was already recording as I approached. "You have a permit for working on private property and altering a natural waterway?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. He mumbled something about environmental regulation. "Funny," I said, stepping closer. "Because this is private property, and you're trespassing. Want me to call Sheriff Miller so you can show him your permits?" He scrambled out of the creek and fled, leaving his wrench behind. I posted the video online with the simple caption, "Just trying to save my tomatoes from unauthorized environmental regulation." It went viral locally. Comments roared. "That's Ethan's Creek. Eleanor Vance has lost her mind. Serves Maple Glen right." Sheriff Miller paid me a visit, his boots worn, his mustache thick. I showed him everything: the footage, the maps, the deeds, the trespassing evidence. He took copies, nodding grimly. He promised to pay the HOA board a visit and issue a formal warning. One more stunt like this, Ethan, he said, tipping his hat, and MS. Vance could be facing significant fines, maybe more. I added more trail cams, hung old reflective CDs from branches to spook night prowlers, and upgraded my deterrent sprinkler with a delightful blend of fish emulsion and peppermint oil. Stinky, but organic. Days later, it nailed another of Eleanor's goons, who slipped on the muddy bank and rolled downhill, reeking to high heaven. Word spread like wildfire. The general store buzzed, and folks started buying me coffee, calling the story the Ballad of the Stinky Trespasser. Eleanor filed a formal complaint with the county, claiming I was hoarding natural resources. I countered with my comprehensive packet: maps, water rights deeds, trespassing videos, the surveyor's preliminary findings. The county clerk actually chuckled as she filed my response, placing it right on top of Eleanor's complaint. Eleanor's next HOA meeting completely tanked. Only 3 residents showed up besides the board. One board member resigned on the spot. Another waved a printout of my plumber video, demanding answers about illegal activities and potential liability. Her reign was crumbling. I hired a professional surveying company from 2 counties over top tier, using drones, satellites, the works. Their final report was bulletproof, laminated, and utterly irrefutable. The creek, its source, and the disputed boundary were all mine. The rerouting was legal and entirely on my property. I posted copies of the key pages by the creek fork, adding a new sign beneath the old one. No unauthorized access. Violators will be recorded and possibly sprayed. Eleanor marched up my driveway the following Sunday, demanding a civil talk. Civility died when you cut my water pipe, Eleanor, I stated flatly from my porch. She hinted vaguely at a mutually beneficial water-sharing agreement. I held firm. Trust was gone. Her usually perfect bun was fraying at the edges. Her confident stride seemed weaker. She was sinking, and she knew it. The county's official ruling arrived a week later, gold seal and all, confirming my exclusive water rights and property boundaries. I posted copies everywhere: my gate, my barn, and yes, even on the Maple Glen Estates Community Bulletin Board, legally, on the public access side, with a small, typed note. Learned something today? The Maple Glen online chat forum apparently exploded. Eleanor's previous claim that the county had issued a temporary ruling in her favor flopped hard when the local water district simultaneously exposed their excessive water usage pre-drought, fed entirely by their unmetered sprinklers sipping from my creek. Eleanor called an emergency meeting to vote on filing a lawsuit against me. It failed spectacularly. 4 of the remaining 7 board members voted no or abstained. One resident suggested the board issue a formal apology to me instead. Eleanor reportedly stormed out. Their lawns were irrevocably dead. One resident's desperate attempt to paint her lawn green had melted into sticky puddles in the heat. The State Environmental Board summarily rejected Eleanor's last-ditch complaint against my creek diversion, citing no jurisdiction on private water rights disputes. She sent me a flowery, manipulative letter, practically begging for a meeting to find common ground. I didn't reply. She didn't want peace. She wanted control. An HOA consultant hired by the panicked board urged immediate xeriscaping, calling their current state negligent landscaping and a fire hazard. Eleanor tried to spin it as an eco-friendly transition, but nobody bought it. My lush, thriving garden stood as a vibrant mockery of their dusty failure. A local news crew did a follow-up, filming my creek, my deeds, my signs, and interviewing me calmly. The televised piece was balanced, but the online comments roasted Eleanor. "Never mess with a farmer's water" became a local catchphrase. She was formally ousted as HOA president at the next scheduled meeting, replaced by Mr. Davies, the quiet ex-principal. He sent me a respectful, handwritten letter introducing himself. I replied simply by sending him a copy of the official county ruling. Message received. I finished the permanent rerouting of the creek over the next few days with a rented mini backhoe, lining the new channel with natural stone, looping it gracefully through my orchard before letting it feed into a natural marsh well away from the Maple Glen border. No more free water for them. It wasn't about revenge. It was about restoring balance and respecting boundaries. Eleanor sometimes watched from her property line afar, silent. Weeks later, my land thrived. Peaches hung heavy on the branches. Bees buzzed contentedly. I invested in a proper underground irrigation system, solar-powered and timed, feeding every root zone efficiently. At the farmer's market, folks marveled at my harvest. Maple Glen Estates began its transformation, embracing sagebrush, gravel, and drought-tolerant native plants. Honest landscaping now, not fake greenery sustained by stolen water. Eleanor Vance moved away. No forwarding address, just gone. A regional magazine ran a feature on my story, several pages long. It portrayed things fairly: no heroes or villains, just the facts and the fundamental importance of property rights. Mr. Davies eventually asked if I'd consider allowing Maple Glen residents. Carefully vetted, no sign of Eleanor's old cronies. A tour of the creek source on my property, purely for educational purposes. After some thought, I agreed, barring Diane or anyone directly involved in the tampering. They came, they learned, they listened. It felt like a small measure of healing. One older woman murmured, "We forget we're just borrowing this land sometimes." I nodded. It keeps score. At dusk, I sat on the old wooden bench by the creek, the one Grandpa Arthur had carved, let it flow into decades ago. Scout, my old loyal dog, rested his head on my knee. Coyotes howled in the distance. Stars began to blink awake. The water sang its steady song. Mine. Peace wasn't something freely given back. It was fought for, earned, and all the sweeter for the struggle.